This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Susan Coelius Keplinger for the first time. Welcome to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast.
Thank you.
Want to let people know that we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You might see that icon that says listen on Newsly. And we do have that coupon code for our listeners if they use Ghost to get 1 month free premium subscription. But we will be a featured podcast on that platform later tonight. And I want to welcome you again to the show. We do have your website up for those of you who are just listening, susanck.com, and that will be fully clickable when we're done. And today's episode is actually episode 963 of the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. We've been on the air since 2016, tracking that on Apple Podcast. And this episode, we're going to talk about this particular topic that we're bringing up right now, the art and science of storytelling and marketing, and how will AI change everything. So again, we'll bring back to your link, and that will be clickable when we're fully published. But again, thank you for being on the show.
Excited. Fun conversation for sure.
So one of the questions you like to answer first, ready to answer, was like, what's the best social platform for my business to be active right now, just as a first initial question. And then we can maybe dive deeper into your brand and everything, but just as an initial conversation.
So the most important place to be is where your customers are. And I think that can be a different place for different brands and for different types of companies. And so rather than following any sort of trend or following the mob, you really have to stop and say, where are my people? If you're in a place or you're selling a product or service where people are actively searching for you, well, then the place that you're probably going to look is someplace like Google, where they're raising their hand. They're saying, I'm searching for this solution. I'm searching for this product. I'm searching, right? If you're a small local brand, for example, or even a small local service provider, you want to get in front of that search, that intent. But if people aren't searching for you because they don't really know what you are or who you are, then you have to create that intent. And intent creation platforms are going to be places like Meta, Facebook, TikTok, etc., where you can go out and tell a story about why someone needs your product or service, like why someone needs your brand. So it's really stopping to say, like, are people actively looking for me? In which case, am I really just trying to be there in that moment of search? Or is this something that, like, I need to show them why they need my service or product, and therefore I want to, create that intent. So, if you're a plumber, someone's only going to need your service when they have a problem. You want to be there at that moment of problem. If you're selling someone a pair of, dazzly, sparkly unicorns, maybe they don't have an explicit need or an intent, then you're going to go create that intent. So it really depends on who you are, and you just have to stop and say, who am I? And don't try to follow the mob. Don't try to create something that isn't there, but think about creating intent or capturing intent, I think, is the right way to think about it.
So is like data-driven marketing a big part of like trying to determine like what your best strategy is? Because like if you do an analysis of your customer base, right? It's like I'm a data guy. I'm a software designer, and we use a lot of data analytics to kind of figure out what we're going to build. Like we'll get pitches from the sales team, and they're trying to push some products, and we'll try to figure out and what's the best approach for what they're trying to do. But we have a lot of data that we get to say, okay, this product's doing well, so we need to try to get this kind of funnel running for them. But we actually build the product. So like when you're trying to do that analysis, can you maybe describe to somebody who doesn't understand what data-driven approach is the best way to start that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to remember and recognize is if you don't have any data, it's going to be hard to have a data-driven approach. So first, you actually have to be honest with yourself on whether or not you actually have data that you can use and insights that you can use. But once you do, and once you've gathered and collected and organized that data, then you should trust in that data. You should not trust in your gut any longer. You should say, well, what does the data say? How are people engaging with this product or service? How are people engaging with my ads or with my website or with my landing page? And making sure you're using it. Now, let's say, okay, I know I've got lots of data. How do I go about thinking about using all of that data? The first step in using data is collecting the data, right? So if you've got lots of data coming in, you got to collect it. Then you got to organize it, right? So that you can actually ask questions against it. And you want to make sure you're collecting the right data. So let me give you some examples of what this could mean, right? Let's say that you're an e-commerce, or in your case, you're talking about a design product or a design package, right? And you have users using your app, right? You have an app, it's a gaming app. You're playing Candyland on your app, and your users are coming in. The most important thing is that you've got a data and analytics structure configured. You're capturing that data, and that data is called event data. So you're capturing the data about what people are doing within your app. You can take that same derivative out to an e-commerce store, right? Someone's coming to your website, they're clicking on things, they're adding things to their cart, they're making conversions. All of that data is called event data. So the first step, obviously, is getting people to come, and so that you actually have data to collect. And then it's organizing and structuring the data in a way that you can start to ask questions against the data. If you're not capturing the right event data and you're not organizing that event data efficiently, then it's going to be really difficult to ask questions against it and trust in it. We're working at my agency, Force of Nature, with a company right now that has, we came in to help them out, and they're capturing 130 different events for their app. And none of the events were really the conversion that was like the user is taking the step. So it's really easy to throw a bunch of data in there and throw a bunch of events in there. But if it's
Maybe
the
buy
wrong
some.
data, it's not organizing well, then it's not very helpful, right? It's not very useful. So that first step from a data and analytics perspective is, am I collecting the data? Am I creating the right events? And then how am I structuring it so that I can start to say, start to ask questions against it and say, what is my conversion rate, or what is my conversion rate for this particular cohort, or what is my conversion rate for this particular audience that I'm targeting?
Yeah, it's kind of like, I'm a musician, and we sell a lot of merch, right? So we sell t-shirts, we sell posters, and when we're checking like our Shopify and we're trying to check the data, it's like, well, it's nice to know who visited, but I want to know who actually bought the sweatshirt, like who
Who actually
actually
bought?
bought the poster, who bought
Who
the
gave
actual
you their
physical
money?
thing, and then yeah, and who's coming back. Yeah, and who
Yeah,
keeps on coming back and buying stuff. Like, so if I got one customer and they keep on coming back, I want to know more about that. At least my mindset, rather than always trying to spend money to
absolutely.
get the new person that just looks at stuff and never buys anything. So if I
Oh, that's
actually
such
know
an
I've got
important
like five
distinction.
customers out of 100, yeah, they actually buy
And
something, and then there's 90, five that just look, but five
it just look.
constantly buy stuff. I think I probably wanna know about the 5, and maybe I wanna know about the 95 that didn't, to get them to buy something, but I think I would rather focus on the 5 out of 100 that are
Maybe,
actually
maybe
buying
you want to
something.
know about the
But,
95,
yeah,
or
just
maybe
to
you really
kinda
want to think about.
maybe.
And so in marketing, what we do is we're going to call those, that's going to be your people who have purchased, or they're a cohort of users who have converted, right? That have made that conversion. And as you grow, you might have lots of cohorts of users. You can create cohorts of users by all sorts of different characteristics. You can create cohorts of users by the month that they made a purchase. So like they made a purchase in January. This is my January cohort. Or you could say this is my sweatshirt cohort, or this is my guitar cohort. Gibson Guitars is one of our clients, and we have clients that buy different types of guitars. So we would consider those cohorts different cohorts of customers. And then you can start to, again, because you've organized and structured your data, you can start to ask questions against those different cohorts. So someone who went and bought a sweatshirt, what's their chance of coming back? What's their repeat rate, or what's their lifetime value? Right. So not only how much did it cost to acquire that particular customer, how did I acquire that particular customer, but how much value does that customer have, and who are the most valuable customers? And you have to remember, there's only so many people in market for a particular solution at once, right? So if we think about music and guitars, there's only so many users who are actively looking to buy a guitar at any given time. Obviously, during COVID, there was more people looking to buy guitars, but now there's a certain number. There may
Yeah.
be significantly more that are in market to buy a sweatshirt, right? And so you can then start to break apart and think about, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to use marketing to target people who want to actively buy a guitar, or I'm going to use marketing to actively go sell some sweatshirts. And I have an understanding of the value of the people that buy those sweatshirts, both based on the season that they buy them in, right? Like you're probably not going to sell sweatshirts in Florida in July, right? It's quite bad targeting, bad idea. But I know that in
Yeah.
Florida in December, I sell lots of sweatshirts. And so then you can really start to think about what you want your strategy to be, and how you want to think about that investment, and how you want to think about, those types of returns. And I think that's the essence of like data-driven marketing,
And
right?
also,
Organizing your data, structuring your data, and then
yeah,
being
and
able to be thoughtful about like not only how you present your business, right? You want to sell swag, you want to sell stuff on your website. Well, make sure that you're putting the right stuff forward at the right moment so that when someone arrives, they're like, that's actually exactly what I want to buy. I'm in Florida in December, just old. I want this sweet sweatshirt. I'm going to convert. I'm going to buy. And then you're able to use your marketing and use your
yeah,
targeting
that's
in tandem with
interesting
that.
because that's when like we could start thinking about AI, right? But even before AI, you had like the Amazon model, right? So you show up on Amazon and it presents to you the things that you probably have bought before or things that you look at. Besides, I'm a musician, so when I go to Amazon, I see a bunch of synthesizers. I'm a keyboardist, so I see like Moogs and Korgs and Rolands seem to pop up. So it's actually looking at what I had bought before or what I've shown interest in, and it kind of put it on the page. I know it's actually showing to me that. So I'm wondering for like AI driven marketing, is it gonna ask like chat GPT better prompts, like using those prompts in a way that's gonna look at that data and give me the best possible outcome that maybe wouldn't have thought of before, but maybe like the right strategy for using AI.
I mean, I think one of the most exciting things about AI today, especially in the near term, right? If you're a business owner and you're like, how is this going to impact my business? Like, what can I do with it? Is that OpenAI and ChatGPT, as well as others, are going to make it more accessible to you to be able to do the types of things that some of these big companies are already doing. So AI has been around and inside of, and big data driven AI has been inside of these big companies for a really long time. Like, Amazon, obviously, this is one of their superpowers. Is you come to the site and they're going to use AI to generate that experience for you. They're going to predict what they think that you're going to do next. They use big data models. They do lots of complicated things to be able to do that. That's not accessible for the everyday business owner, right? The everyday business owner doesn't have a
Yeah,
team, an R&D team that's going to be able to build the web infrastructure that Amazon can do, which is why Amazon works so well, which is why it performs, but at a cost, right? Like if you're a business owner and you're going to push your products through Amazon, you're paying Amazon to do that, right? Like you're way better off if you can do this direct to consumer, direct
yeah, yeah,
experience where people are coming to you. So I really think one of the most exciting things that's going to happen is there's going to be solutions and tools that make some of those experiences possible for the everyday business owner. And particularly when you start to think about like what does AI do, right? So AI, I think just is I still and lots of people argue with this analogy, but I still think AI is more like a calculator, right? Everyone's really afraid of it, but it really is right now in its current state, it's like a calculator. It's going to make things work better, go faster, make these computations happen faster. And so one kind of derivative of that is if you think about sort of the world of marketing AI is it's this idea of generative AI, right? That you can generate things in at scale in multiples where previously it would take a human much longer to do that, right? You can do lots of drafts. So for example,
hmm
you could create thousands or tens of thousands of different landing pages, whereas historically maybe you had to have a human hard code a single landing page. Now you can use the mechanisms of AI to
yeah, single
dynamically
one, yeah,
generate thousands or tens of thousands of landing pages for a particular product. These are the types of things that Amazon is already in many ways doing, right? Like they're able to either dynamically or in a cached form generate these types of experiences, and those tools are going to become increasingly available to every business owner. Where this idea of personalization becomes more real because you can use generative AI to say, okay, I know who that person is. I know what cohort they're a part of. I'm going to dynamically generate in this page and this experience for this person. And then I'll see how they perform and see how it does and learn from that. And maybe I'll tweak it next time or I'll do something different next time. So a lot of these types of things of AI are absolutely already are already part of big companies. And I think where you're going to really see them scaling in and really being interesting is for
hmm
first, small and mid-sized companies. ChatGPT can create those product descriptions in lots of different ways, 100 different ways. So you can test 100 different ways of telling a story or 100 different ways of selling a product. And then you can go and see what works best. And you don't have to have a human copywriter that's doing all that work. And you don't even have to have a human coder that's building the pages. It just will generate this experience for you, this generative AI will let the everyday business really start to be able to iterate and do things that historically has been excluded from them because of just size and resourcing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the cool things about the AI. What I tend to use it as a tool, like in music production. If you think about it, like how many different types of mixes could I do, right? If I ever got an AI soundboard, it will do hundreds of variations of my mix, where I would have had to have a recording engineer do that and go run through that multiple times. It's the
Precisely.
same kind of idea. Like instead of instead of using it to write the song, I use it for production. I use
Yep,
it for recording engineering to engineer like the compression rates on my stuff, right? And say, give
yep.
me all these different variations and let me hear like 20 seconds of each one. So then I can make choices that maybe I couldn't have done before. When I
And I
see
think that
people
that
using it
word
like that, then
choices,
it's I
but
think
I
it's
think choices,
powerful. Yeah,
that's the word,
yeah,
right?
choices.
Like, you still are making the choice. And I think that's where AI is today, is this
Yeah,
calculator. It's gonna output all these results, but I'm unconvinced that it's gonna be able to tell the story in the masterful, beautiful way that a human is able to do from a creative perspective. It can pump out enough variations of it and potentially, like, test enough variations of it, but I think you still need to
hmm,
sculpt. And to me, that it was interesting. I was up, my younger brother Nick an actor, and obviously there's a big strike going on, and there's this big controversy around AI
right,
and what
yeah,
should be the role of AI and storytelling,
right. The
in
scripts,
that
yeah,
world, particularly with writers. And we're like, my whole family's sort of in tech. My older brother and I, in particular, were on a walk with Nick, and we were like, well, you can't. First of all, you can't stop the juggernaut. That's my opinion. Like, the juggernaut's coming.
yeah,
But how cool for a writer to be able to use this really rapid ideation, this really flexible ideation, to start to morph and bend and massage this just quicker, and then be able to then use these
yeah, yeah,
mechanisms of for production to produce more. And the appetite for content right now is absolutely insatiable. So, like, why do we have to have these $100 million films that take 3 years or 5 years or whatever many years to produce? Like, there could just be more and more good content, so that you're, as a consumer, there's just always fresh stuff that fits your interest, that fits what you're interested in, and there's just more, and it's, a startling amount more, and then couple that in with
yeah.
VR
Well, I
headsets,
think
and
it's
we're all in
the
trouble.
yeah, I think it's the kind of but you think about it with music, it was the same idea. When sampling came, there were people said, "Well, that's gonna knock all the musicians out of business," but it didn't because, like, it's a different kind of tool set. Like, if you go and use a sample, it it's not the end of the story. Like, you tend to use samples along with traditional instruments. It's just another tool. Just like the digital audio workstation is a tool versus an analog workstation, right? So a lot of times, like, you can live with all these things, all these options all at once. And I'll do analog and I'll do stuff. And I have generative AI within my role and synths called this thing that will actually create bass lines based on what I play. But it's like a helper. It'll go and
It's a
write a
helper.
bass line based on my chord progression, or it'll go jump in a jump. Yeah, and you can go in and change it. So I don't use 100% of what it gives me, but I use it as a starting point. So if I don't have a
And
drummer, I can use it
at
as
some
a
point, it
starting
may
point.
get
It will
good
actually
enough.
fit. Yeah,
At some point, it may get good enough that it's better than you or better than me, right? Like, at some point, it may be that, like, it
yeah,
just, like,
good. But
knows, but it's not there yet. And
yeah,
I hear everyone that's like, "It's gonna happen
yeah,
so fast," but when
yeah.
you look at these step changes in technology, like, they are often step changes. Now, this is a big step change, right? What's happening in the world of AI, and it's gonna be a big step change in the world of marketing and MarTech, the world I kind of exist in. But I do think we've kind of hit this step change. We're gonna need to have another step change next, which maybe is, like, call it 10 years from now, right? So I think what I kind of am getting the feeling and looking at how it exists, particularly in the world of marketing, like, okay, cool, this is amazing. We're gonna see some incredible innovation come out of this, some really cool stuff that's gonna happen in the next, decade. But I do think that, we're gonna be working off of these models that exist today, to use it and really figuring out how to use it, right? And I think some of the applications that the places that can expand, I think one of the things that's most exciting is the applicability across so many diverse industries, and how, and that also then brings in, like,
Mhm.
these incredible opportunities for people who have specialization. So obviously my specialization is in the world of marketing. I know it, all things Martech. I've got 20 years of experiences in Martech. And so I'm really thinking about, okay, how do we use AI to scale, to grow our capacity? And we can talk about some of the ways that we're doing that. And that's really fun. But what's so neat about AI is every specialist, different type of thing can bring in that same specialization and use and how they use it, right? So it's not like this is some technology or tool that was built for marketing. No, this is like applicable to all industries. And I think that's just so cool and so
Yeah.
exciting to say, yeah, how are you going to use your underlying musical knowledge to lever this into that space? And how is an artist, how is an author going to do it? How is a chemist going to do it? How is a mathematician going to do it? And that is just so neat to really bring that applicability into across so many different industries. And that's where, I think it'll be very groundbreaking and world changing, is to have it happening, hitting every industry. Every single industry is going to be just hit with this. And the next layer that will likely really be transformative is less about what the AI are doing, and is just going to be the increase in compute power, right? Like as quantum computing, if we
Yeah.
can make that really firing and working, just being able to compute more and more information using these same mechanisms. And so to me, the exciting part about AI is in the tooling that's coming, because I think there's just so many incredible entrepreneurs that are coming up with just incredible ideas and concepts around how you can lever these mechanisms into every industry. But then really taking people's specializations, like your just deep knowledge of music, and say, okay, well, how can I use this? How can I pretend like I now have 1,000 people or 1,000,000 people who are effectively like working for me, and I can massage that into scale and growth and creativity. I think that is just such an exciting opportunity for all of us. And theoretically, in our most perfect world, if we all do this well, then like the need for work, right? Like kind of everything becomes really efficient and really cheap, which means like $1 can buy so much more because it's not necessarily humans that have to do every single thing, which effectively just should make all of our lives like better and cheaper and yada yada yada, right? So if you really listen to the like Mark Andreessen did a great podcast on sort of like the implications, the really big thinking implications of AI, and really talks about how, if we put on our optimist hat, which I think I live my life as an optimist, and I don't, the pessimistic rabbit holes aside, then yes, it's going to displace lots of human labor and it's going to do all of these things, but it's going to create this abundance that is going to just be really fun to live in and live with.
Yeah, I think it's just one thing about AI I do have to note as an artist is that, when it takes ideas from artists and doesn't credit or pay them in royalties, it's the same kind of issue that happened in sampling. And so I would say the creators' rights are important, and we can't be neglect that. And so if AI learns on people's material and it actually uses that material and doesn't credit or pay royalties for that material, then I think artistic people have an issue with that. But beyond that, the being able to have tools that help me, right? That's cool. But to actually have tools that actually take somebody else's work and then don't credit it, and then let me present it as my own work, I don't think that's cool. So that's one of the things I think that people have to be mindful of
I mean, I think
with
it's going
AI.
to be paradigm shifting, right? Like paradigm shifting. So I think we got to have to think creatively as a community about like how do we think about this idea of monetization and payment and credit and and whatnot. I think that's the AI ship is effectively sailed. Like it's happening whether we like it or not. Um, and so then we have to stop and say like, okay, assuming this is happening and this is a reality, whether we like the reality or not, um, how can we think differently about it? How can we do it differently? And historically, we've figured it out. Like humans are smart, so it's that optimism of okay, we're going to figure out how that
Yeah, what's like digital right?
creators
Yeah,
get
I mean
creators
digital
keep
rights.
creating.
Yeah, well, it's like digital rights management with samples. When samples first were introduced, people didn't get paid. Then digital rights management occurred, and people get paid when you sample something somebody's work, you get that the way that works in the music industry, you get credited. You actually get royalties. Whoever owns the copyright, whoever owns the master, if that's reused, you get paid. I think that type of structure needs to exist within the AI world the same way. And so that has to be considered for original work so it doesn't get people don't get ripped off. But that's just a concern. Because just
This might
because you
be
can
this
do
might be
something
might be beyond my pay
doesn't
grade.
mean you
I like
should
hear the
do it if
problem.
it's actually gonna take rights away from people.
I mean, I hear the problem. I just don't know
Yeah.
if I
Yeah,
like necessarily like
that's
have the
yeah.
solution. But yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it
it's
might be a solution. I just think people should be mindful because, like, dude, what happened with sampling is people could do it and they did it, and then the legal system caught up with it and created a structure where people got paid, and it kind of
yeah.
came after the fact, and it got imposed after the fact. So I think the same kind of situation can exist with AI when it starts to do that. And there are people who already running lawsuits and stuff, but for material like authors and writers and artists who are
I
seeing
mean, listen,
and
this
learning
is a
their
it's
work in
learning
AI
off of their
work.
content 100%. It's a conundrum. We should say it has learned because it has learned. It is now the knowledge is sort of there.
Yep.
But I think this is like the same. Do we fear the next thing or do we figure out how to embrace it and innovate with it? And the internet was a very scary thing, like this idea of like just total connectivity. And yet we have figured out how to embrace it. And there's obviously always winners and losers in each scenario, but capitalism does seem to continue to solve these problems. So, I think the scary part about AI is really the disintermediation of labor in a scaled way, like in my world as well in marketing. Like eventually, theoretically, we could be disintermediated completely. But then at the same time, that should commoditize the offerings to such an extent that they're virtually free. In which case, heaven forbid, we can all just go to the beach and hang out because the AI bots are doing all of the labor and we're just living. That's the dream. On the other hand, there's like the pessimistic side, but I don't want to go into that side. I just want to like embrace the dream
Yeah.
where we
Yeah.
all live on a beach and life
Yeah.
is good.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think the people. Well, I mean, for everything that gets created, there becomes a new reality, right? So the internet created jobs that support the internet because the internet isn't just this non-physical thing. There's machines that support it. All the robots and drones that get built, all a lot of the wireless, cars and AI cars still have to have kind of backup of human people behind them. So there's a lot of stuff that within the IT world of design, these apps and stuff, yeah, they're talking about AI doing programming, but there still is a level for the kind of master programmer and designer. And there's still stuff at certain levels, there's always going to be human interaction. For everything that got replaced by industrialization, there still was humans in the factory. Even today, with all the industrial robots, there's still humans in factories to a certain degree.
We
So
we tend to
I
figure out
think
ways
we'll
to make
find
ourselves
different
valuable.
jobs and different types of skill sets, and people have to adapt.
Yeah, I think we tend to figure
Yeah,
out
and
how
you
to
have
make
to. But I
ourselves
think it's the
valuable.
individualism of a human being. Yeah, the
100%.
individualism is really the thing because I think the future is customization. And if you're talking about that customization, still what you kind of proposed that even though AI is this calculator, you still think the human element was there for the creativity of it. Right? The way I believe as an artist, the reason why people want to listen to new artists and just not listen to every artist that already existed is because they want to hear that individual creativity. And within each person's skill set as a marketer or a scientist or whatever, there's always that human mindset that's always going to come up with something that didn't exist, right? So for all these things that never existed, there's always going to be that unique aspect of your personality as a human being that you're going to offer something. And I think people will be able to focus on that and have more people doing kind of dream jobs of actually being able to create what they want to create and having the tool sets of 1,000 workers as AI bots helping you build something that maybe you couldn't be a Henry Ford, but now you can. Now you could actually build something that you didn't think you could
I mean, I think the
at a
scary
level
part.
that you
I'm
never
gonna
thought
I'm
you
gonna
could.
I'm gonna pop on my AC here really quick before we go into the scary part because I can't be hot and scared. I think the scary part is like, what do we do about India?
Mhm.
right now India is like largely supported by things like call centers, right, and jobs that are going to be quickly replaced by AI. And so you've got millions of people who are doing jobs that are like going to be quickly replaced, and it's going to happen fast, right? Like, why would you deal with a human being in India or in the Philippines when you can literally have a voice synthesized AI bot that does a better job of more quickly and more rapidly and cheaper answering those questions, right? Because and so all of a sudden, the scary part of AI is going to literally be the displacement of those, hundreds of millions of jobs that are in places like India and the Philippines and China that are they're going to be replaced fast, and the solution's going to be better. And those economies and those governments are not going to be positioned to solve for that crisis. And so I think that's the risk is less what's going to happen to creatives in the US, and it's more like what happens if 10 or 20% of India's economy suddenly doesn't have a job because a computer has replaced that human, and they've done it the next year or 2 years, right? I think that's actually my bigger fear is for the world is
well, that's the kind of
is like, what are we gonna do with all these people?
Yeah, well, that's the social problem. Like just like if you create a tool, it's kind of like what Henry Ford used to say. Like if you look when he has his industrialization for the Ford plant, he still felt like I got to have workers that can buy my car. If you create a
But the
situation
speed at which this could happen, could be
it happens so fast.
Could be that's going to be the difference. It could be
humanity.
It could be, I think we like watching things happen.
Yeah,
that's happening. That's maybe not happening quite as fast, but this one might happen very, very fast. And I don't know that we're ready for that.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that sociologically, you can do something with technology, but there's still politics and socioeconomics. So if you shift all those people to not being necessary and they all drop into poverty, that causes social disruption. That causes political disruption. What value do you put on peace? Because this is the problem sociologically.
I think this is the risk more than this is the disruption of low skilled labor is the risk, and because the speed of that disruption is going to be very, very significant. So I think it's so exciting.
Consequences, like if you get a whole. It's exciting,
if people can't feed their families.
Things that don't exist in a vacuum. Well, it's the holistic concept. Like if you do, everything you do within a society has an impact, right? So if you quickly just take away hundreds of millions of people's ability to make food, to live, they have no interest in the structure of society. If they have no interest in the structure of society, then they would be going against the actual stability of the society. So how much do you value the stability of your society versus the profitability and the technology? Because there are situations that you could have like a Great Depression type of situation worldwide in different sectors. And then that instability tends to cause war. If you have war costs money. So there's
this is the doom. Now we're going down the doom scenario, right?
Society has to calculate the cost. Well, it's not exactly unexpected though, because if you do something that fast, if you go that fast, there are winners and there are losers, right? So they kind of pie in the sky that the winners, that everything's going to be a-okay. That doesn't always happen. So I mean, if you have no plan and no money to take care of those people are people, and they tend to do things whether you want them to or not.
And I think this goes
the society
extends into
have an interest,
but this extends into why we have to really think about things from a global perspective. Like we can no longer think of like, oh, we have this nation with our borders, and it's like no big deal if like the people in India lose all their jobs and are starving. Like we know that that's not true, and so this really does like, and this is the reality of what's happening in technology is it's unleashed, right? Like this is not something you're going to be able to like stuff back into the pot and like be like, oh, I don't like it. ooh, that's really scary. Therefore, let's not do it. Like it is already global. And there are so many people striving for a better life all over the world that they're going to lever whatever mechanisms they can to achieve that life. And so this is part of the reason it's so important to acknowledge the global nature of our world and how interconnected it is. If we had developed technologies in Silicon Valley that then put 10% of the workforce in India or 20% of the workforce in India, where by the way they're all 25-year-old young people who will not be exactly happy that they no longer have these opportunities and these jobs, there are very significant sort of global implications. And so how do we start to think more globally and make decisions more globally versus this antiquated, oh, this is my nation state that we drew on a map, a couple hundred years ago. I really have to say, like, okay, we're all interconnected. The decisions we make, the things we do are going to have implications that could affect my life and my ability to act. And so I think that's it. Just this in particular, and the speed at which this will all happen is going to happen on a global footprint. And so we should think globally.
Yeah, I mean that's the globalization is like, it's like an idea of like the UN or like just that, you have this globalization, you have these multinational companies. They're not just in one nation, they're in multiple nations. They're grabbing, they have interconnections. Some of these companies have bigger budgets than nations, right? So they go make decisions that affect other nations. And so when they have it at that level, then countries have to actually have like a point of view that's actually, gonna be part of this whole kind of holistic thinking. Like if you get to a point where you have a bunch of multinationals that knock most of the like a larger percentage of the world unemployed, and then a shift of resources, that's not really gonna stand in that kind of thing. You have to have more of a concept. People are gonna have to have a voice. Because people don't have a
But again,
voice, there has to
we're
be an
focusing on the doom
interconnection and an
scenario.
understanding of what you do.
We're focusing on the doom scenario. The
Yeah, it's
optimistic
not
scenario
unlikely
is
though.
the optimistic scenario is that these things also they simply reduce the costs of doing these things, right? And so as you commoditize things, right, as you make things cheaper, then it's cheaper to go buy that product. It's cheaper to go buy that thing, and so therefore people don't need as much money because goods and services are simply cheaper because rather than having a human doing it, you have an AI whatever doing it. And therefore it literally just, if we take the abundance mindset and we say that it will simply create more, then you will need less to have more, and that should lead to a net positive outcome for humanity, right? Like one of the places where you see really an applicability here that's just really extraordinary is there's a lot of people who believe electricity, power, energy is going to effectively be free in the next some number of decade. I don't know the timeline, right? But if you make energy free, if you no longer need to pay for energy because of both how it's processed, how it's
Yeah,
stored, how it's extracted, etc.,
that would change.
like it changes the world, right? Like if energy is free and abundant, then and you're not paying for energy, then suddenly like you can do a lot more things. You can think about the world a lot more differently. And so if we take on this abundance mindset instead of a scarcity mindset, and we say AI is going to bring us abundance, it starts to change the paradigm a little bit about how we think about the importance and the excitement behind it, because it just creates so much more. And that means more for everyone. And there's plenty of people, the majority of people in this world do not have enough. And so if we can if we can lever these mechanisms to more efficiently and effectively deploy everything from energy to food to medicines, etc., suddenly there's just more and more for less, right? For less of a cost. That's the mindset I'm going to take.
Yeah, as
Because
long
I
as
don't
that
know what other
actually
way you
happens.
go.
But the mindset, the only problem is the profitability mindset tends to be is that profit actually brought down to the consumer, or does the company, the shareholders, and the profit makers actually take all the profit?
But the idea in this abundance
Because if you
mindset is if
don't
there's
actually
abundance,
reduce,
like if there's more, if there's unlimited
then it should
supply,
lower the
if you think
cost.
about supply and demand, then the cost should go down, right? Like this idea of abundance is like if
Should go down.
they should go down.
Yeah.
That's the
Well, it's just if the
exciting
structure,
happy.
that's yeah, it's the happy. But the question is like, will the the energy companies that produce energy today, are they likely to go down to zero profit?
Oh, listen,
Or are they
the
likely
existing
to not
stakeholders,
actually still
if you're
control part of that profit?
if you have a monopoly today and you're like making lots of like this scenario is like a little bit troubling. You're like, wait, abundance, like hold on, wait, energy's at zero, like hold on. So there will be resistance within the system to achieve these
Yeah,
things
that's not going to
because
work. Yeah,
of
that's not
exactly
going to
that,
work.
right? And so the question is like, do we act fearfully, right? Do we say this is really scary, like what could happen, and therefore we're going to restrict, we're going to use the government to like prevent,
Mhm.
like let's look at driverless cars, right? Driverless car accidents in this
Mhm.
country are like a leading cause of death. Humans driving cars are a leading cause of death, and it gets blown up when like, oh my gosh, the Waymo car in San Francisco like hit a cone, and it's sort of like, okay, let's even say the Waymo car in San Francisco kills a person,
Yeah.
one singular
No,
person,
I agree.
versus the,
Yeah, it's
and
safer.
so this,
Yeah, it's
we have to
safer.
decide if we're going to like be fearful or if we're going to acknowledge like, but what is it replacing, right? Like if driverless cars are able to interpret and understand a landscape and kill half as many people as a human driver, isn't that a net positive? Right, like half, and we're not talking half. It's going to kill like,
Yeah, it's just
like
yeah, it's just a kind
minimals.
of
But so
yeah. I mean,
we
it'd be
either
a
are afraid
significant
or we're
reduction. I
excited.
guess again, the problem is like there's individual. Yeah. Well, there's also individualism. Like America has a tendency to have like a really strong individualism. So the person that likes to drive that car, even if they're given the fact that, you know what, driving that car, you're more likely to die or get killed. A lot of people would take the freedom choice, which is very not that logical, right? It's like they rather have the freedom to drive it, even though they know they could kill their family, even though they could die, they might injure somebody, right? Than to have the robot do it.
I
And so
mean,
I
this is
think that
that
what you're
I
going
would
to
go
have
with.
is maybe the argument of
I'm gonna go with
individualism
I'm gonna go with
versus
maybe.
trying to take it over.
I think like when you realize that you can get in a car and you can crack open your beer and drink a beer and scroll through your phone and you don't have to like deal with a car, there's going to be a lot of people who quickly like you're going to have your like bell curve. So yeah, at some point you'll have your holdouts of people that like to drive their cars, but I think the net number of people who are like, this is actually awesome. It's the same thesis with artificial meat, right? Like we know that the methane that comes out of cows' butts is not good for our planet, right? Like cows are net not great for our planet. So everyone's like, eat less red meat. Well,
Yeah,
the optimists,
bad for the planet.
right? The optimists aren't like eat less red meat. They're like, listen, we can create synthetic red meat that tastes better than a cow, and is cheaper than a cow. Are you really going to tell me? And if you put both pieces of steak on the plate, you can't tell them apart, right? Like, are you? The optimist says we're pretty sure that once
Yeah,
people realize how good this is, and that it is better for them, and that it's cheaper, and that it's better for the planet, like that's why synthetic meat has a bright future because we think we can make it for cheaper, better, like across the board. And so it'll have a bell curve of early adopters who are willing to have those first bites of meat, who are willing to try those first vegetables that were grown in a warehouse, under artificial lighting with all of the biodiversity in the soil that our gut biome needs to really be incredibly strong. And this is what AI offers, is that ability, right, to bring data at scale into this innovation to figure out how to solve some of these really hard problems and solve them across all the industries, across energy and food and medicine and not just, like I said, my little niche corner of marketing and music. And I think that's where if we can say, wow, if we can really lean into essentially taking the collective intelligence of humanity and multiplying it by whatever percent, millions, right? Then suddenly we all just got like way smarter. And this is so exciting. Knowing that humans are good at surviving and we're going to be able to figure out how to solve some of the hard problems and the downstream implications that are going to come when jobs change or the way we think about labor changes or the way we think about education changes. And I think it's that idea that like if you can have a growth mindset and say I'm so excited to change with it versus fighting against it, that's where we're gonna be able to win. I think when we have things like you know, saying we're going to regulate self-driving cars because we're uncomfortable with them, even though we demonstratively know they save significant numbers of lives. That's a fixed. I think that's to me what the fight is against is really getting people to be excited to having that growth mindset, to saying we're going to grow, we're going to solve this, we're going to figure this out.
Yeah, I think you're always gonna have some holdouts, and there're gonna be some political, efforts for certain people that just they don't like the idea of machines. It's just kind of a science fiction kind of concept, but it's been out there because of the individuality of people, human beings. But some things are not logical. Like you said, like they people want to ban it because they fear it. That's how things start. When we go to the industrial age, the horse and buggy era, there was a lot of people got knocked out, right? The people taking care of the horses, people giving them the hay, people had the black, the guys put the shoehorns on them. That whole economy shifted, and it was pretty fast. It happened not as fast as this, but once the cars got out there, and you lost that whole era of the horse buggy. That the whole so we're kind of jumping like on steroids, mega
Mega
exponential
steroids.
with like
Yeah.
the industries getting not changed. But yeah, but it's like you're gonna get whole new industries. I mean, I saw somebody showing like flying people doing a flying like outfits like Iron Man. And they were doing a race with these jet suits. They look like Iron Man suits, and people were actually racing them. And it's saying that yeah, this is gonna change how people could deliver stuff. They actually have human beings like flying around. And like so the technology is so advanced that you kind of get to this kind of Star Trek world. If you think about like a Data in the Next Generation, he's there as the ultimate AI, like the cyborg AI creature, but he's integrated into that world where he was able to do things like Spock did super fast that they needed right away. Like have that computation power is very powerful for humanity. It could solve disease, could solve all kinds of problems that we have by a lot of like illogical things that we've done that once you have these AI things that you can get rid of gridlock, get rid of things that are ineffective. So if you start to have those economies of scale, like you said, food prices go down, energy price goes down, production prices go down. You're doing a lot of things that were kind of like not really thought out. And so if you start to get that, and then other people will have the freedom to go into like mind areas that they weren't going to do. Like the person who was doing the customer service, now they could go do something that they never thought they could do.
I mean, I think
The
the thing
ability
that's
for
like
human
this,
beings to kind of increase their capability.
I think the thing that's either exciting or scary, or I don't know. I don't even know how you want to like position this. But like, what do you do with all these people? Right? We got all these people. We're not gonna have a need for as much labor for any of us. You're just not gonna need to work as hard because like we're gonna be able to lever technology to help us. Energy's free, right? Food's now free because energy's free, and like you got all these people, and you've got this abundance of content, right? You got like an unlimited amount of content. I think the question is like, how does humanity interact with the world when you can literally put on a goggle? I went to the arcade with my son this weekend, and I haven't put on those VR goggles in forever. We go to the arcade, we put on the VR goggles, and everyone's telling me, oh, it's not that good. I mean, it was, I don't know, we did this like Jurassic Park ride. It was horrifying. And now you can take that experience and you can lever the mechanisms of
Mhm.
technology and AI to create your personalized experience that's going to give you exactly what you need. I mean, the quality is already there. It's already extraordinary.
It get better, yeah. Oh, you froze up. I don't know what happened there. Hmm. You froze for a second.
Dropped out for a second there. So yeah, so like
Yeah, yeah, you
what
dropped.
happens?
Yeah, you're back.
Sorry about that.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Starlink's not quite as perfect.
yeah.
Elon's got like 2,500 or some number of satellites up there, and he's going to add like 10 times as many more. But no, it's like suddenly it's like, how do we as humans interact with each other, and how do we interact with the world when literally like you energy is free, food is free, content is unlimited and personalized, and you can put on a headset and you can get whatever experience you want, and you can feel like you're part of that experience that you want. Like what does that mean to be human when these types of things start to happen? What does it mean to have a community or a family or interact with nature and the environment? I think these are some of the places, Ready Player One, you like kind of see a preview of it. Like what would that look like? And I think those are the types of things that are, could be coming, right? You can stick on a headset and you can literally live out your wildest dreams. You can travel to wherever you want. You can be part of that, whatever it is that you want. I think it's a little bit of
I
I've
guess
got two
that's where
young
it
kids.
becomes
It's
the
kind of a
issue of like,
scary future for my kids. I'm like, oh my gosh, like
yeah,
we think screen time is a problem now. Like, what's
like,
coming?
well, that if that reality replaces actuality, right? It
Yeah.
replaces the outside, then you start to worry, is the human empathy for what is going on outside going to be there if you can build your perfect world and then you don't interact socially with other people? And then the question is, do you lose empathy? Do you lose understanding for cultural differences because you don't have to even interact with another human being? So
I
that's
mean,
like
we already
part of the
see that
fear
happening
is like
now.
if you, yeah, we see it happen now, and we see there's a consequence of for people not being like, disconnected. So if you're disconnected and you only want to see what you want to see, then there's a societal. I'm a sociology major, and there's a problem with like disconnectedness and anomie and things like if you get too much into these tech things and you don't deal with human beings, there's a consequence to that. That can't that's not always positive because you might be able to live in that island, but there's the rest of humanity. So the question is like how much do people disconnect or how much do people more connect more? If the
Or
technology helps people to connect more, that's better. If they make them connect less, I think that that's a bad sign.
And then what's the role of government and thinking about, government is of we the people, right? And how we organize ourselves. How do we want to think about that organization within that paradigm, within that framework? I mean, these are the big, crazy, weird questions that I think are coming our way. It's already happening, right? Like everyone's like AI has just arrived. Well, AI has been
Mm.
incrementally growing and getting better for the last, call it, decade. It already is in your YouTube feed and how you are exposed to content, or how your X or your Twitter or your whatever, right? Like how you doom scroll is because of the mechanisms of AI. And if you then start to think, okay, now we've just added this next level of how we are able to
Yeah,
effectively predict, right? Use the
but
the history, use the
but
everything that humans have ever produced, predict what the future might look like, and do that at scale. It just gets, I think it's like, I think I don't know. It's a uncertain future, um, for sure, and I think it can be both exciting and very scary at
the
the
thing
same
is,
time. And so,
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of capability. I think human beings that have to like look at it, like you said, like the calculator, and not replace the person who comes up with the theorem, right? The person who comes up, if you get to a day where human beings don't come up with their algorithms, they let the AI come up with the algorithm. They don't come up with original thoughts. They just look at everything that was ever created and let the AI do it. Then I think you're gonna get kind of science fiction, Harlan Ellison, Ray Bradbury, Gene Roddenberry worlds where people relied too much and then lost drive, lost creativity, and so you have to be careful if you get lazy, mentally lazy, and don't just use it as a tool, but use it as a crutch. And I think that's it's everything is a balance. I'm a Buddhist, and everything is in balance. Something gets out of balance, it's probably gonna have a bad effect. If you use it in the right balance, it's probably good. It's usually what happens is people take something and they overdo it, and so that's always the worry with tech is do people, overdo something to a point where it becomes a bad thing. Not that you wanna be negative about it, but I think people are gonna have to have understandings and some core ideas, kinda like the way the Constitution is. If you're gonna have a brave new world, you have to have some kind of rules. Not them say you can't do it, but to have some kind of a paradigm to know what
I mean,
could
I think the
be
the hard the
destructive.
hard part the hard part about thinking about rules is we don't incentivize people, unlike Singapore, where you can make lots of money in government. In this country, which is really arguably where AI is emerging from, we don't incentivize people to go into government. We don't pay our people in government. Yes, when they get out of government, they can make all this money, but we really don't incentivize inside of the bureaucrats who are doing the everyday work. They're not incentivized. And so, if you take a smart young technologist and you say, hey, do you want to go in government and learn how to write good regulation? Or do you want to go work at this private tech company where you're going to make like 5,000 times more money? Like we see where everyone's going, right? And so the scary part for me is that now we've got people writing regulation that don't understand the underlying technologies. And so trying to do that is really hard. And there are some wonderful, I have some friends that are in government that are putting in their civic duty, but we don't incentivize that same type of thought. And so my fear is that you're going to try to have regulators regulate something they simply don't understand. And so how do you do that? Like I don't have a good answer for it. I just see the challenge. We see that challenge in my world of advertising and marketing. You see it all the time, right? You're like you listen to even a politician or a congressperson talk about cookies and their understanding of like what is a cookie and how do they work and how they just don't understand the underlying fundamental mechanisms, and they're not technologists, so like I'm not saying that they necessarily should, but now you're saying, okay, we have this world changing event that's here and we're going to try to regulate it by regulators that don't understand the underlying technology. It's never going to work. The technology is always going to stay ahead of the regulator and the regulation, and so I think we as a society need to really, I think about some of these core principles of what do we want to be, how do we want to exist together, and how do we want to sort of structure ourselves, again on this very global basis, because we're all very interconnected in this capacity. But I think it's going to happen fast and slow at the same time. Like it's going to happen fast, but it's not happening like tomorrow, right? Like everyone's not losing their jobs tomorrow. This is going to be something that happens incrementally over time, and hopefully we'll have opportunities to sort of see it and grow with it.
Yeah, I think it's a big opportunity for human beings, but I think like anything, when you think about like the FAA, it's not in the Constitution, but we had to regulate aircrafts, or what they would call crash, right? You have to have some kind of governmental agency to regulate airplanes, right? You have to have the FDA to regulate pharmaceuticals. So at some point, you can't just have the fox in the hen house. Like if you just have a bunch of mega technologists do it, they don't necessarily do what's in the interest of the public. They might understand the tech, but there's a moral concern. At some point, you have to have some regulation. That's just my point of view.
No, listen. I think regulation is an important part of our society and how we exist as a nation and as a world. I just think it's complicated. That's all.
Yeah, it's a complicated thing, but I think you have to have some kind of boundaries. Not to say you can't do everything, but I think you have to have reasonable understanding of protecting people's rights. And it's like as they're going forward, technology sometimes will infringe on your rights or your freedoms if you don't have any kind of control over it. And I think human beings need to be protected in terms of their individual rights. And so that's where I think the concern will be. And whether you don't understand the tech or not, if the bottom line, if it damages human beings or infringes on their rights, then you have to come up with some kind of structure. But I think that's a talk for another day. But I think the tech and the marketing, with AI going into the future, it's wide open. A lot of people are going to find new ways to be curious, and I think that's the real the advantage of AI is the ability to actually control your own future. But it's kind of in your hands. If you have to be willing to embrace change. And so at that point,
I mean,
I
it,
think
it
that's where it's
amplifies
gonna
all of
end up
us.
being.
If you have the opportunity, and I really encourage, everyone, like, don't fear what is, ChatGPT that has free plans. Like, go play with it, go ask questions, go get curious, and go grow. Because first of all, it's coming, but I think it is so exciting. It is so cool to be able to use it, and it's not perfect, and it has hallucinations, and it's sometimes wrong, but it does amplify the speed at which we can process information and grow, right? It just really amplifies your ability to move faster. And I think that's just so exciting. And I'm invested deeply in it and want to continue to invest deeply in it. But I think it is something that we have to embrace because it's here and it's coming, and we just need to figure out how to solve a lot of these hard problems surrounding it. But I believe we can.
Yeah, I think it's like everything. Like like I said before, in music, we did solve the sampling issue where eventually the people got paid. So it's like I think eventually the legal structure, lawyers are going to figure out ways to make laws because that's what they're into.
I mean, listen,
It's like they'll
lawyers
figure it out.
are a profession that have a lot to fear from AI, so they will definitely figure out how to
Yeah,
protect.
yeah, they're going to do what they can. But I thank you for being on the show because it's a really interesting conversation. It's a very futuristic thing, but it's not like the future is now. Like by the next minute you go check it something out, there's always something new happening. So like it is changing before our eyes. It's not science fiction anymore. It's like real. So
It's not science fiction
it's
anymore.
something that people are gonna have to. Yeah, it's actually the real deal.
Definitely
So
super
thank you
excited
again
about
for
it, and
being on the show. Check out
always enjoy chatting with
SusanCK.com.
it.
Yeah, SusanCK.com. That's clickable. And make sure people can go there. Maybe before we leave, you can tell people if they click on that, what will they find there?
I think right now, if you click on SusanCK.com, it's going to take you to LinkedIn because it's under construction. But you'll discover me. You'll get access, or you'll be able to find all
Oh,
the places that I exist, and all the different projects that I'm working on and companies that I'm affiliated with.
okay. So they can get in touch with you from there, and then they can follow up with you
Absolutely.
on opportunities.
Yep, for sure.
Okay. As long as, if you have a different site, you can let us know. But if that's the primary way you want people to contact you, that's cool.
It's a great way to get a hold of me. It sends you right into my, like I said, right now we're overhauling that experience, and so it sends you right now into my LinkedIn. I'm very active on my LinkedIn, and again, it gives you a great perspective on all the different projects that I'm working on and things that I'm thinking about. So don't hesitate to send me a message.
That's cool.
And
We just want to make sure
I'd love to connect.
Okay, well, that's that. We do encourage people to check that out. We'll be fully clickable everywhere we're published. And again, thank you for being on the Family Electric Coach podcast. Have a good night, and we hope that we can send some people your way with the audience if they're interested in marketing. You're an expert at it, and I think they would want to talk to you about how they can increase their capabilities. But thank you again for being on the show.
So much fun. Awesome chatting. Good luck with all.